Hello. Now we're going to look at the first topics in descriptive grammar. I'll say a little bit about what descriptive grammar is. I'm then going to talk about what we study in descriptive grammar. I might mention why, because some of you might be wondering. And we'll see how we do for time. We'll actually get on to talking about parts of speech as well in this section. We'll see how that goes. Okay. So a couple of important things about descriptive grammar. The first is that descriptive grammar obviously is an attempt to describe. It's not prescriptive. It's not an attempt to tell you how grammar should be. That's what you do in practical grammar classes. You're told grammar should be like this, and so you try to make your grammar like that. Descriptive grammar is an attempt to describe the language. So, of course, as everybody knows, languages as naturally developing, naturally evolving things don't really follow very strict structural rules. There are always exceptions, there are always oddities. So any system of descriptive grammar is only ever the best fit that we can make for some kind of structure, but it's never 100% suitable for any particular language, right? That's not the way that languages work. So you know that. So don't be surprised if there are some occasions where we say, well, we could look at it in this way, or we could look at it in a different way, or actually in our system, it's kind of difficult to look at it in any way. Such things are possible, okay? And that's the nature of language. So we shouldn't be too worried about that, and we shouldn't think that our system of grammar is somehow faulty because it's not a perfect fit with real language, because real language doesn't work along such kind of structured lines. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is that the descriptive grammar that we're going to use is a description. It isn't the only possible description. So different books, different authors will take slightly different approaches and use different vocabulary in order to describe the structure of language, which is fine, right? And it's not a question of whose is the best way of looking at language. There are different ways, and they can be useful for different purposes. The way that we choose to look at it is it's a traditional way of looking at it. It's not the most modern. However, for our purposes, it is, I think, the best at least that I've come across. It's not too complicated. And this is very much an introductory course to descriptive grammar to allow you to get to know the basic terminology of describing syntax in particular, which you then might choose if you choose to study linguistics in any particular language. Then you might move on to more advanced descriptions. The description that we're going to use is, you might find this hard to believe, but it is fairly simple. And it does work pretty well, and it will give you a good basis, and hopefully it will allow you to look at the structure of language in a different way than you have before. Okay. What else do I need to say about descriptive grammar? The key thing about learning descriptive grammar is that it works a little bit like mathematics, in that in order to get to the next stage, you have to understand the previous stage. So you can't move on to advanced mathematics until you've mastered adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, and everything else follows from that. So the same is true with descriptive grammar, that we're going to start talking about parts of speech and move on to talking about the structure of sentences. And if you don't understand those things, then the things that come later are going to be very, very difficult. They're going to be impossible. Okay. If you do understand those things, however, the things that come later are very simple. They're just simple applications of what you've already learned. Okay, so it's extremely important that you understand the first few lectures very well. If you don't, okay, don't think, well, I'll just skip that part of the course and maybe I'll understand what comes later, because it doesn't work like that. So if you have problems with those first parts of the course, well, doing it in this form, of course, you may watch again and again. You should discuss with other people on the course, and of course you can write to me, you can discuss with me, and I again advise you, if you have serious problems, to get in touch with me via Skype and talk to me. I'm not so scary. Okay, so it's very important that you structure the learning properly and that you go bit by bit. You need to watch the videos in order. Okay. Okay. Descriptive grammar is difficult. People do sometimes struggle with it, particularly those people who find sort of logical, mathematical thinking more difficult, and people who find thinking generally difficult. Hopefully we don't have too many of those on this course. We'll see. So you do need to actually study. That's why it's important for me to make these videos so that you can actually have these lectures somehow, because just asking you to look at the exercises and try to study something yourselves probably isn't going to work. Okay, we'll see how we go. Okay, so you've already looked at descriptive grammar in terms of words, the phonetics of words, right? The structure of an individual word. We're going to move on now to looking at sentences. Okay, so we're looking at syntax, which is about the way that words combine into sentences. Okay. Every language has its own syntax, obviously. There are many similarities between European languages, and I will occasionally point out things as we go along which are similar to Polish, different from Polish. So syntax is our subject. So that means that our basic unit that we're looking at is the sentence rather than the word. Okay. But the first topic that we have is parts of speech. And parts of speech, these are categories which we give to individual words. Okay, so I need to say a little bit, first of all, about what I mean by word. Word is a word which you probably think you understand, but we need to just discuss it a little bit, because the word word can actually have very different meanings, subtly different meanings, and even linguists who talk and write about language, about words, very often use the word word in different ways in the same text. So let's just say a few things about that. So when we talk about a word, right, there are different things that we can mean by that. We can mean what you find in a dictionary. Okay, so there is a basic form of this word which you would look up in a dictionary. But then you have the problem that there are forms of words which are different. They are different from the form you find in the dictionary. They're different from each other, but they appear to be part of the same words. Okay, so this happens in English, but it's much more of an issue in Polish. So you take the Polish word for dog, right? So you look up the word pies in the dictionary, but then you ask yourself, well, is the word psem or psy, is this the same word as the word pies, right? So it sounds different, it looks different, it has different meaning, and yet in the dictionary it would be all under the same word. So when we talk about a word, are we talking about one entry in the dictionary? Are we talking about one set of letters and the way it looks? Are we talking about one set of sounds, okay, and the noise we make when we use this word? Or are we looking at some kind of concept behind all of these words, right, which is the same for all of them, for all the different forms, so that you can say, well, the word pies and the word dog are the same word, right, even though they look different, they're from different languages, but somehow they're the same because they have the same meaning, right? So when we talk about words, we could mean any of these things, and there's not a right and a wrong meaning. It just depends on the situation which of these things we mean. When we talk about words in this class, in descriptive grammar, we are talking about items in a sentence. Okay, so when we say this word is this part of speech, for example, what we mean is that this word in this sentence is this part of speech. And words which look the same, and indeed in many senses are the same, can be different parts of speech. So we all know that you can have two words that look the same, but they're not the same word, right? We know that especially in English, you can have two words that look the same, but they're not pronounced in the same way, or you can have two words which sound the same, but they're not written in the same way. So of course, we understand that there can be different words in this sense. But what appears to be the same word can play different roles in a sentence. Obviously, you can have the dog chases the cat, or the man kicks the dog, and in the first case the dog is the subject, and in the second the dog is the object. So that's one change. But we can also have changes in parts of speech. There are certain words which can be 3 or even more different parts of speech, okay, which is what we'll get onto in a moment. And even the words which seem to be most obviously associated with one part of speech can sometimes surprise you. So again, you take the word dog, it seems pretty obvious that dog is a noun, right? However, in English, there is also the verb to dog. Our trip was dogged by bad weather. You could say something like that. Now, of course, in Polish, when you have such changes, it's usually marked, right, with an ending. But in English, it isn't. So exactly the same looking word can be functioning as a different part of speech in a different sentence, right? So there are many examples of this, even with kind of grammar words, right? So if you take a word like in, okay, in is obviously a preposition. How could it be anything else? But then we say in English, when something is fashionable, we say it is in. So things can be in or they can be out. So then you say, well, if something is in and that's it, and that's the end of the sentence, then it doesn't seem to be working as a preposition. So maybe it's actually working as an adjective to describe something as in, something is out. Okay, so basically in English, it is possible to use pretty much every word in several ways. So it is not a case that you can learn that one particular word is one particular part of speech. Okay, because the examples I will give you will be examples that show you that what is apparently the same word actually can be different parts of speech. And obviously I will do that to make it tricky for you. I'm not going to give you examples, just identify the word dog and say that dog is a noun, right? That would be too easy. Okay, so what you have to do in order to be able to identify parts of speech is you have to be able to identify what the word is doing in this sentence, right? So that's what we're interested in. We're interested in sentences, even though we will look at parts of sentences, obviously. We will look at phrases, we will look at clauses, and we will look at words within sentences, but always within sentences, okay? There is a sense in which a word doesn't have any meaning outside a sentence, right? That only sentences can have meaning. Okay, so a word, of course, is a sign, it's a symbol, and it may be symbolic of something outside of a sentence, but that's not the same as this word having meaning in saying something. Okay, it's just standing for something. It's a different type of meaning. So again, we can get into a discussion on what do we mean by meaning, but that's a pretty deep philosophical topic, so we'll leave that. But essentially, words mean something when we put them in sentences. It's sentences which carry meaning both semantically and pragmatically. So we are interested in sentences. We are interested in words within sentences. When we combine words within a sentence, we will call them phrases. Okay, so if I say the big black dog chases the cat, then the big black dog is a noun phrase. Okay, all of it. And when we have sections of sentences which are made up of different clauses, so these will often involve a verb, although there are verbless clauses. Well, we'll get to that when we get to more complex